Okay, we're going 5, 4, 3, 2. Nick and Vince, thank you for making time as we kick off this week. We're going to be talking about all things New York, as we often have done with Nick and Vince. Last time we saw you, I think, was at Planet 13 in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah. You guys scheduled me for Friday morning, 8 a.m. after the whole marathon.
You gotta be ready when you're with this crew.
Funny.
No, I remember. I will never forget that.
Actually. You would think Friday mornings at Planet 13 in Las Vegas would be quieter, but it was actually like people start stocking up there pretty early.
For sure. Yeah.
That's one market that we've met. And Nick, last time I think I saw you in person was actually in New York at your facility. But today we're going to be talking about maybe less sexy stuff, or at least certainly industry stuff, and what really matters to businesses like yours. Nick, we'll start with you, because my rudimentary understanding of what you're talking about in New York these days is about the excise tax and the schedule of payments for companies like yours. Talk about sort of where we've been, where we wanted to be, and where we are today. How does that sound?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you. I think it's not super sexy maybe on the face of it, but it does mean like hundreds of thousands of dollars per operator in the state. So it ends up being pretty sexy if we can get it fixed. But I think fundamentally the problem that we have is there's a misalignment in between the tax collection cycle and the actual revenue collection cycle for the operators in the state. I think, the state has done generally a fantastic job when you compare to some of the lessons that they've learned from other markets, and like implementations that they've done, like the COD list, and the two-tier market system in general, how that could lead to a more sustainable market. So I want to say first, like, they've done a very good job, but they couldn't have possibly thought of everything. And so I think when they wrote the regulations, they said, distributors can give the retailers 30 days in terms. And then another group that was writing the tax part of this wrote, operators must file and pay their taxes 20 days after the quarter ends. So in a perfect world, if there was always 30-day terms and people paid right on time, it wouldn't be a massive misalignment. It would be like a 10 to 15-day misalignment. But what really happens is like it takes about 45 to 50 days for you to collect from a retailer. Retailers are all brand new businesses as well that are figuring things out. That and New York did an incredible job with the social equity side of it, but that need funding and terms to be able to run their businesses. So operators don't have a choice but to give terms, and stores don't have a choice but they need terms. And so when it takes 45 to 50 days to pay, operators end up footing the tax bill for like 35% of the sales in that quarter. So if you sold $500,000 in a quarter and you have $50,000 to pay, like $20,000 of that you just have to come up from your pocket. And that might seem like a small amount of money, but when you're growing and making payroll, just struggling to grow your inventory and make payroll every week, that $20,000 to $30,000 starts compounding every quarter. And like today, over 30% of the operators in New York that are licensed have tax liens against them, right? And so we're smaller operators. We're trying to think this through, and we looked at the liquor industry. And in the liquor industry, any medium and small operators, which de facto everyone in the cannabis industry is right now because it's a brand new industry, they get to pay their taxes, their excise taxes, which they also have, annually. So we said, okay, why can liquor pay their taxes annually, but cannabis has this system where we're actually having to loan the state money from our funds, right? It doesn't make sense. So that seemed very reasonable. We got support from the Senate, from Senator Cooney, and from the House, from Assemblywoman Lepardo. They passed our bill that was to give operators the option to file these taxes annually. And paradoxically, Tax and Finance, the committee's response was, well, no, there's already too many people that are behind on their taxes. So if we give you this annual option, then nobody will pay. And our argument was, well, they're behind on their taxes because of the way it's structured. If you fix it, they will pay because they'll have time to collect it. So that wasn't possible. And then a much larger player that we've been friends with and working with, Vince at Nabis, reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing operations here in New York now. What can we do to get this through? So we pushed as hard as we could, and the governor vetoed the bill because of the advice she got from tax and finance that this was going to lead to a bigger hole in their coffers. And now we've moved to really just say, like, okay, understood that you won't move to an annual option. Can you at least just rationalize this and move it back 30 days so that we have the 45 to 50 days that it takes to collect? We're cannabis. It's not magic that the money goes from one bank to another. It's checks, it's cash, it's stuff that takes time. So that's kind of the effort that we're leading now, and Vince has been instrumental because he's got a ton of perspective on how this affects the market as a whole, coming from being a leading company in California, right?
Yeah. So it went from last year advocating for an annual payment, this year advocating, since that got vetoed, just not even more flexibility, but a little bit more time. So instead of a 30-day term,
just 30 more days. Just try to align as close as possible the revenue cycle with the tax collection cycle. It's still going to be tight for us. We're still going to be fronting some of it. There will still be invoices that are not paid at the 50th day, but at least that'll be like a single digits percentage versus like 35 to 40% of your bills are not paid. Yeah.
Right. And Vince, talk a little bit about that, because as Nick was saying, there's perspective you bring from other markets, but also in New York. Talk a little bit about what it means for businesses like yours.
Yeah. I mean, I think Nick, set the table really well here. Coming from California, you can kind of see it's the poster child of AR problems, AR being accounts receivables, and what comes with accounts receivables is obviously the payment for the inventory that was sold to the retailer, but oftentimes the taxes as well. And so California took several years to actually push off that tax responsibility to retail now, because the sort of intent of the tax law is to create disincentives to buy cannabis because it's a vice, and so in many ways, so like consumers should bear that burden and pay the tax as they buy cannabis, and then that tax is supposed to be forwarded to the state. Right now, it's kind of being forwarded to retailers at point of sale, then forwarded to wholesalers, and then to the state. And so in California, what happened was it actually caused, it created so much financial strain that it caused the death of so many businesses in the state. And, like Nick said, it's just every quarter when that tax is due, you just run into a cash flow problem where liquidity becomes an issue. And liquidity is an issue for small businesses, for large businesses. I mean, if you look at even major banks like Silicon Valley Bank, if you can't get your money to pay your payroll and you still have to pay the state, and you're not winning an argument against the state, you go out of business. And so eventually operate, and I'm not suggesting this because I think it's additional administrative burden for the state, but eventually in California, what happened was distributors ended up pushing off that tax payment responsibility to the state, to retailers, because at the end of the day, retailers, there's always leakage. No one's making money off of collecting and handing taxes to the state and being this like intermediary and conduit. People are in fact only losing money because you not like, Nick addressed the problem, which is right now that it's actually not even the worst situation and it's already pretty onerous, which is, there's payment that we have to front to the state before it's even due. And second is, what if that retailer goes out of business? Then, you default on that excise tax, but the state's still coming after the distributor for that money. Right. And so you never make money off of the excise tax. It's always
and a key difference, right? Is that the retailer collects the money that instant, right? Like the consumer doesn't get they don't get weed fronted to them, right? So
So I mean, I think all that being said is, it's a pretty simple fix. It's basically just adding, it's keeping all the same mechanisms the same: quarterly payments made on time, but just 30 days later, i.e. like just 20. Basically, the mechanism is actually 20 days after the longest payment term period that the state allows. And right now it's a net 30 term, so plus 20, it would basically just be 30 days. 50 days. And right now it's at 20 days. So
and it seems to me, I work in cannabis, you guys work in cannabis, so it seems obvious, but it does seem to me that New York has been willing in some respects to make sure the industry thrives or make sure the industry survives, right? I think there's certainly been a crackdown about unlicensed cannabis retailers, right? So there's been that component, empowering local governments to do more. There's been a huge ramp up of more retailers approved, right? There has been things that the state has done. This is one of those things. It's just not the one that's most obvious, but for the folks in the industry, it really makes a big difference, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add there that I think we would be missing a key thing if I didn't say the state did quickly adjust the excise tax structure significantly, right? So props to them for that. They went from a potency tax that was effectively 25 to 30% for the excise tax to just a flat 9% tax, which was much easier to deal with administratively. What we're saying to them is like, this is the last little adjustment you need to make so that the whole structure makes sense, right? But I also have confidence in them, and they totally have listened to stakeholders. They've made changes. They decoupled from 280E as well at a state level very quickly. So I think there's hope for this, and that's why we really want to make the problem clear to them, so that I think if they understand it, they'll be open to fixing it.
Yeah. I think the other thing, and I'll ask you, Vince, is that we've run into this in other markets, not so much in New York, but when we talk to a lot of people across other markets and even Canada as an entire country, is that there's so much effort into the legalization, setting up the market, getting retailers open, and then legislatures are like, we're done, or the work is done. But truthfully, there are these tweaks, there are these small changes or big changes too that will, there's some legislators that don't want the industry to thrive, that's for sure, but also that make it an industry that can survive. And this seems to be one of those things. But these things, once legalization happen, every market has to do some of these things because every market is unique. The operators are different. The time to market is different. The taxation is different. And you must have seen this in other markets too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's sort of always a general changing of the guard that does happen in terms of people in the legislative seat or the policymaking seat. Or even the regulator's seat. And so there's people that come out of the gate who are sort of like policymakers who write the regs and implement it. And then there's people who kind of steer the ship after the ship sets sail. And those are very different people. Those are more operational folks that are sort of enforcing the law. And so oftentimes once we get there, they listen to the stakeholders, but then we need to help fill the gap of how to actually pass legislature and amend things. So you kind of have a split brain there. And so there sometimes is friction, but as long as the people in the regulator seat are open to ideas and they're willing to help and willing to make amends, in California, I would say for the first 2 or 3 years, there was emergency regulations put out every 6 months, right, or new guidance on regs every 6 months. And so while that was kind of a little bit annoying, it did end up making the quick twitch adjustments that were needed to, allow for the market to keep growing and scaling and not hit little speed bumps like this and hitches. And to be clear, I mean, we're not asking for a rate reduction or anything. It's just a couple extra days to pay.
Right. Well, as I said, it makes perfect sense to me. But I'm not a legislator in Albany, and you are the folks that are meeting with those folks. So good luck to you as this process continues. And I guess is it mid-budget cycle now in New York, and we'll know at some point. What's the process, Nick?
The budget should be completed April 1st, but for the past couple of years it's been late. So
so they get an extra couple days? Is that what you're saying?
They do. They get as long as they need. Most likely by mid-April, April 15th is when some critical state roles and jobs start getting not paid. Payroll starts failing around then. So they get it done by then, one way or another. So about like April 15th or so, we should see that.
Just in
And
time for
then if
state
not,
employees to
we're
head out
going
for
to see a
420.
bill. Sorry. And then if not, we're going to see a bill when session continues after the budget that we'll put in.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we'll connect with you as time goes on. I just like that the state gets an extra couple of weeks to do their work and pay their bills. I was just saying, Nick, right? Just in time for state employees to go out to shop for 420. So that's good news.
Exactly.
Vince and Nick, thank you so much for joining us as we kick off this week. We'll connect with you as time goes on in New York. But thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Jay. I love your hat. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care.
Just for you this morning. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.